There we go. Let's get back to the beginning here. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Women Around the World webinar. My name's Heather. I am the founder and CEO of GrasshoppHer, which is a mentorship app for women. Our number one mission is to increase the percentage of women in leadership roles. We do this through mentorship, sponsorship, through these type of resources. So educational webinars, we have campus programming, we have programming for moms returning to work, we have programs for senior mentors, so you name it, we have it. We're running this particular webinar in honor of International Women's Day, and I know we're a little late, but we wanted to do it towards the end of the month, and we can of course always celebrate women. So we have invited two guests here who I will introduce in a minute and then let them introduce themselves as well. But we really wanted to highlight and focus on international issues and issues that women face around the world. Usually our webinars are very US centric. And so we really wanted to highlight the work that women are doing for other women around the world and issues that impact women who are not in the US. So hopefully this is really educational for you just on a purely to-know basis. And then for all of you who are in nonprofit and international policy and I mean, there are a host of other sort of disciplines that speak to this. This will be really enlightening and educational for you as well. So one quick webinar hygiene. Please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A chat box throughout, and we're going to save about 15 minutes at the end to get to all of those. So submit throughout. So without ado, I would love to introduce Kendra Thorogood from Kiva. She is a senior investment manager, and then Almeera Khalid from Girls20, who is an advocacy and engagement coordinator. Lots of big words there, so apologies. I am going to, as I fiddle with these slides here, quick note on agenda. We're going to do introduction to the panelists and their journeys. We'll talk about, making a difference around the world, and then we'll go into our Q&A. So to start, I'd love to do introductions one by one. I'm going to ask each of you these questions here. They're quite a mouthful, and feel free to answer them at your own pace. So first, Kendra, tell us a little bit about Kiva's mission and yourself, of course.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Thorogood. I'm a senior investment manager, as Heather mentioned already. Just to give you an idea of what Kiva is a crowdfunding platform like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, but instead of fundraising for small businesses or projects like that, we actually fundraise microfinance loans. So microfinance is an industry that is meant to provide financial services to people who don't have access to the traditional financial system. There are actually 2 billion people in this world who we consider unbanked, and access to finance is one of the UN's SDG goals as well. So this is something that we are looking to solve for. And at Kiva, our mission is to expand financial access to help underserved communities thrive, because we believe that financial access is paramount to ensuring that everybody has equal opportunity in the world. So imagine if you could never get a loan, if you could never open a savings account, without access to those financial services, it puts you back in the world, and it doesn't give you the same opportunity that somebody who can open a bank account or can access a loan at reasonable pricing has. So that is Kiva's mission. That's what we're looking to solve for, specifically on the lending side. So we crowdfund. Anybody can go to our website and you'll see loans to individual people on our website. So you might see a loan to Maria in Bolivia who wants to buy a cow, and she needs $1,000 to buy a cow, and you can put $25 towards that loan and then get repaid back over time. So we've been around for over 15 years now, and through those 15 years, we've lent over $1.5 billion this way to individual people, and 80% of our loans have gone to women. So we're very focused on lending to women because women tend to be more underserved than men when it comes to financial access. So that's our mission. My role specifically, the way that we do this, so we work in 80 countries, which is a lot. We are a nonprofit organization based out of San Francisco. So for us to administer all of this lending in those different countries would be impossible. So we work with local lending institutions on the ground. And my role specifically is to manage our partnerships and our investments in the local lending institutions in Eastern Europe, Central Asia. And so my day-to-day is very much conducting financial risk and impact monitoring and assessment on those local institutions that are in my portfolio. I work with about 15 institutions right now across 10 countries. So I'm regularly in contact with people from multiple countries, figuring out how best we can support them to expand their own mission and reach out to more underserved and more underbanked people, including and especially women on the ground. So my day-to-day is talking to them about that, seeing what new loan products we can support, ensuring that they leverage our platform in the best way possible to raise that capital that they need to then on lend to their clients, like the ones that you see in the photo.
That's great. We're just curious, where are you based?
Oh, sorry. I'm based in Bangkok, Thailand. So I have lived in multiple countries doing this. But I think there might be a question later where I can go through a little bit more of my experience.
Okay, perfect. Great. The next one's for Almeera. So tell us a little bit about Girls20. Again, we'd love to know about your role and what your day-to-day looks like.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me into this space. And Kendra, it's so great to see the work that you're doing with Kiva. So cool. Microfinancing is so important. So as Heather mentioned before, my name is Almeera, and I am the Advocacy and Engagement Project Coordinator at Girls20. Girls20 works to advance the status quo for young women in decision-making spaces and ensuring their full and effective participation once they enter these spaces. So we primarily work with young women that are ages 18 to 25. So we advocate for change at the global level through our annual Global Girls20 Summit. And we're also invested in changing the status quo for women at decision-making tables in communities across Canada. So we're currently based in Canada, but we do operate globally in 20 plus countries. And I'm currently based in Toronto. In terms of my current role fitting into the mission, so I get to do everything that's related to advocacy and policy analysis. So especially as we're advocating for young women to be in spaces of power, I support the programs team. So we have two programs that challenge our narrative of leadership. So one is more international and works within the G20 and like policy analysis and how to talk about your lived experiences and ensuring that, you know, decision makers are not leaving you behind. And the other one is more within professional development and governance within Canada. So it really ranges from research, writing articles, attending events, and providing insight on our thought leadership and pushing policy recommendations in spaces of power. Now, in terms of my day-to-day, I feel like it's really tough to answer that when you work at a small nonprofit, especially where you're doing big and international projects, because you tend to wear many hats. So I do think this is a very challenging answer, but one thing that is consistent, I would say, is the analysis, research, and writing. There are a lot of skills that you pick up in this space, like around project management, stakeholder engagement, and proposal work. And it really shows when you enter different spaces outside of like the nonprofit sector.
That's great. Thank you so much. Both of you, this question, maybe we'll go with Kendra first, but tell us a little bit about your background. So that can include your educational, your professional background. We really want to know what drew you to this work.
Yeah, thanks so much. Also great to hear about your work, Almeera. I'm originally from Canada, so.
Me too.
Yeah.
We've got 3 Canadians on,
oh,
on
great.
the team here.
Great, represent. So yeah, I guess that relates to my educational background. So I studied international business at university in Ottawa, Canada. And during my degree, I had a class called Globalization in Emerging Economies. And that's where I first found out about the world of microfinance. In 2006, the Grameen Bank, and which is a bank in Bangladesh, and its founder, Muhammad Yunus, won the Nobel Peace Prize. So that really, I mean, they had been working on creating a bank for the underserved for many years, since the 70s. And they were kind of the first ones to commercialize it, and Muhammad Yunus is considered the founding father of it. So I learned about all of that in this class, and I was already interested in finance in general, but I just didn't want to pursue a traditional finance career. Investment banking, all of that was not interesting to me, and did not seem fulfilling. It just wasn't what I wanted to do, but I really wanted to do something in finance. So this just clicked with me, and it was something where I was like, I need to pursue this. This sounds perfect. Leveraging finance for impactful work. This is amazing. So I had an opportunity through a program through the government of Canada, where they were working with my university, to go and actually work at the Grameen Bank, do an internship there in Bangladesh for 3 months during my degree, during which I met my idol, Muhammad Yunus. And that was it for me. I was like, yep, this is confirmed. I am definitely doing this. So after that, I came back, finished my degree, and worked for a local community loan fund, where we would guarantee loans for local entrepreneurs who couldn't access them from banks. From there, I did an internship through the Aga Khan Foundation Canada, which is another development network, where I went to Tajikistan and worked at a microfinance institution there for 6 months. Came back, did an internship in Washington, D.C. at another microfinance network before finally landing my job at Kiva. So for me, my educational background was tied to my field, but my field was not the traditional field you would pursue with a finance degree. And so I mean, I often tell people, like, don't assume that something that you're passionate about has to lead to a specific career path, because mine didn't. Like, look at the subsectors, look at what is not traditionally sold to you as a career path for that degree. If it's something that you enjoy, it doesn't necessarily have to lead to investment banking. So what drew me to this work is the impact, honestly. Just the fact that I could truly work to create equal access to opportunity when I had won the birth lottery was the most fulfilling and important thing for me.
Amazing, thank you. I'm so glad you found that during your education, because sometimes it takes going into the workforce and finding out what you don't like, and then having to, you know, explore, which is fine as well. But it sounds like you found your idol and your path very early on. So you're so lucky for you. I'm so glad. Almeera, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I think for me, my educational background has really nothing to do with the work I'm doing now. I think it was more of like the extracurriculars that I did that led me to the position that I'm in today. But I think that also shows that, it doesn't really matter what you study. Life is very, like your career path is going to be very nonlinear. And that took some accepting on my end, but I realized that actually that's a blessing in disguise. So I studied at the University of Toronto. I studied ethics, society and law, criminology, and I minored in political science. But even as I studied all those three disciplines, I've always been interested in gender policy and migration work. So I was very involved with other organizations like Amnesty International, and really taking up the language around advocacy and activism and these different calls to action. So I've been very involved with them since I was 16 years old, and continue to work with the Board of Amnesty Canada and other campus initiatives around social justice, and in particular gender policy. In terms of what drew me to nonprofit work, it's a bit twofold. I mean, one part is the impact, again, as Kendra said, because I always wanted to feel like the work I did, the passions I felt, I could put towards something. And I think a lot of it had to do with my own experiences with microaggressions due to my gender, and especially because I was a recent immigrant to Canada, and there were just like a lot of personal things that I was seeing, and I just wanted to take action and do something about it. And for me, Girls20 was a space where I could dip my toes into, and it felt very accessible to me, especially with an organization that does international work within the G20. That was something that got me really excited. And the thing about social impact work, I think a lot of people don't find these spaces to be as professional than the corporate world. But I will say that I've never felt like I couldn't, take the skills I've learned now into the private and go into the private sector and not succeed. Because again, you wear different hats when you're in the nonprofit sector. You do learn a lot. So yeah, I think that's what really drew me to Girls20. But I also was a part of Girls20's Girls on Boards program. So when they were having their first cohort of applications, I applied, and this is before I even worked with the organization. And what they basically do is that they'll select you, and then you'll get governance training, and then you are placed on a nonprofit board. So I was placed on Times Change, which is a women's employment agency, and for me to be on the board of directors of a community that I identified with, immigrant women who had the skills, but their degree wouldn't necessarily transfer over. It was really inspiring. And so because of that, I was always connected to Girls20 in a way. And I know we'll talk about it later in the other questions about like how to be more involved within the nonprofit work. But I think it's impact at the end of the day. It's impact and how it makes you feel, because you can't wake up, every day hating your job. You want to feel like you make a difference. So social impact it is.
Thank you. I was going to ask if you were involved in any Girls20 programs before you took on this role. So thanks for answering that. I actually joined the summit in Argentina a couple of years ago. So it was such an amazing experience, and I had firsthand experience with Girls20. So cannot thank you for, enough for the work that you all do.
Thank you.
Kendra, we wanted to ask you about, and we're getting back to international issues. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the specific issues that women in your regions face? And one that we called out here as we were sort of emailing back and forth was income generation for women left behind by remittance workers, but I'm sure there are so many more. So we'd love you to touch on, the screen, those, and just how Kiva's addressing these issues.
Yeah, so I can talk more generally about like women's access to finance and kind of why they don't have the same access generally. in a lot of families, men are known as the breadwinners and therefore the ones that need the access to finance. And that kind of leaves women behind in terms of, my husband will go and get the bank account. My husband will go and get the loan because he's the one who manages our finance. So we're trying to shift that paradigm, and with financial literacy training for women in some cases, with preferential loan products for women in some cases, we're trying to shift the financial management within the family structure as well, because that ultimately gives a woman more power within her family structure if she is able to manage some of the finances that come along with income generation. And in a lot of cases, it's actually women who are generating the income too. They're the ones that are managing their farms out back. They're the ones that like may have a small business tailoring, like the woman you see in the photo. But when they generate income, it is managed by their husbands. So we're trying to shift that power structure in a way, because that is an issue. Studies have found that women are more likely, when they generate income, to invest that income in improving the quality of life for their families, for their kids, for their communities. Whereas, I mean, I don't want to make generalizations about gender, of course, but we believe that shifting that power structure in that family will ultimately lead to the betterment of the family and of the community. So that's something that we're trying to solve for by like supporting loan products for women and access to business training, that sort of stuff for women. And then specifically to my region, as we discussed, in Central Asia, we work in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, and those are two of the most remittance dependent countries in the world. They consistently fall second or third most remittance dependent after, I believe, maybe Nepal, but it's because there are no jobs there. And workers travel to Russia very commonly. In Tajikistan, you go there. I lived there for 6 months. You go there and everybody has a family member working in Russia and sending money home. So that's what remittances are. It's the money sent home from people when they go work abroad. So they generally go work as laborers, whatever. But in Tajikistan, there's this issue where you can say the word divorce 3 times and it means you're divorced. So what has happened is the husbands, when they go abroad, for some reason, they'll decide they want to divorce their wives, leave their families, and they'll just text the word divorce 3 times, and it really means they're divorced from a religious standpoint. And then they'll just totally abandon their families. They won't send any more income home to their wives who were dependent on that income in order to support their families. And the wives are just, they're seen as second-class citizens because divorced women are just seen that way. They'll have to move back in with their parents who can't afford to support the family either. It's a whole big mess. And so we will lend to these women so that they can develop their own income generating opportunities, start their own businesses, or invest more in their businesses to build it out so that they can ultimately earn more income. So it's a huge, huge issue. And that's something that we're trying to solve for.
Great, thank you for that. Almeera, so what are some of the prominent issues that the women you face serve? And I know this will be difficult because you're serving a global community as well as a Canadian community. So do your best here. And we're just trying to understand what programs, and you've mentioned a couple of them that Girls20 has in place to address them.
I was on mute. Well, we work with young women all around the world, and it's very sad to say that the there are some things that are pretty consistent, no matter where you are around the world. So because we work with young women, specifically 18 to 25, a lot of the issues that we tend to kind of work with and we provide support on are around like not being taken seriously, or workplaces aren't safe to work, or that government policies or workplace policies don't protect young women and the different backgrounds that they come from. And so there are a lot of inhibitors of growth for young women, for women, especially younger women, and then Black, Indigenous, and women of color. So young women already face double discrimination from persisting social norms and in age roles in public life, and they are particularly underrepresented in politics. In fact, women under the age of 30 make up less than 1% of global parliamentarians. So there are more young women between the ages of 10 and 24 today than any other time in history, and yet millions of young women are disproportionately excluded from consultations on issues that affect them. They show up, they do the work, yet they're not considered within key decision making spaces. And so, as I mentioned before, we have two programs that try to address this pretty head on. One is international and is based on developing skills to be at the policymaking table, and the other one is through governance on a nonprofit board. So building that experience, whether it be within a policymaking table or within governance, both are spaces where young women are lacking, and it's not because young women aren't interested, it's just that those spaces don't open up to young women. And so we do have targeted measures that range from skill development and mentorship programs. And so a lot of the work that we do is actually around mentorship. It's addressing imposter syndrome and talking about what are microaggressions, how do they happen, and like, what do you do if you are experiencing microaggressions? What do you do if you are experiencing imposter syndrome? And really providing research to, in a way, like provide as evidence, which is not fun to say, but it is something that is needed when you are trying to bring in that empowerment principle.
Great, thank you so much. Next question is for Kendra. So how do you develop the pipeline of the women you're going to serve? And I have a follow-up question after that, and what are the criteria and resources available to potential applicants?
Yeah, very good question. So as I mentioned before, we work with local lending institutions. Kiva is not the one going out and selecting the people who receive loans on our own. We partner with these lending institutions because A, they're run locally. It is not my job to go into anybody's country and tell them what they should be doing. B, they obviously speak the local language and they know their local context better than we ever could. We are the financing. We make sure that they have the money that they need to serve the people that they are working with. That is our job. So they are responsible for developing that pipeline. And our job is to make sure that they do that responsibly, they're lending responsibly, they're using our resources responsibly, and they have all the infrastructure in place to best serve the people that they work with. Something in the nonprofit sector that I'm trying to fight against a little bit is that we talk about the people that we serve or beneficiaries, or they're benefiting from access to what we're doing, but really we should be thinking about them in the way that the for-profit sector looks at people in terms of clients. Like these are clients that are purchasing our services and involving themselves in our services, and we need to serve them to the best of our abilities. So that's something that I regularly talk about and is something important in terms of a terminology shift in our space. But anyway, sorry, that's a bit of a tangent. But in terms of reaching out to women in their communities, our partners it's really important for them to hire people from these communities hire loan officers that have the networks. We actually track how many women loan officers our partners have, because they're more approachable for women looking to get loans in those communities. That's something that's really important to us. Another thing is they will target industries and places that are generally run by women. So if you go into, like fruit and vegetable markets, they will go and hand out flyers in fruit and vegetable markets because most of the people who are running those stands are women. And so, or they will go into like a tailoring shop, like their marketing will specifically target women. And then they'll develop loan products that are specifically for women. So one of the big issues that we see in terms of access to finance is banks often require collateral, which generally just means like an asset that the bank can repossess if the client defaults on the loan. So a house, a car, whatever. But women are less likely to actually have ownership of these assets. There's a huge issue in terms of land rights in a lot of countries. In terms of inheritance specific generally goes to the man in the family. He will inherit whatever assets are being passed down in the family. So there's a lack of asset ownership amongst women. So we will help our partners to develop loan products that don't require assets as collateral, don't require collateral. Maybe they just need a guarantor, those sorts of things in order to make financing more accessible for women. So it comes down to determining what is the blocker in terms of women's access to finance. So collateral, whatever, maybe they are unable to leave their home to go make loan repayments, that sort of thing. So the loan officer will visit their home to collect loan repayments. Just determining what those blockers are and then addressing them in our own in our partners' operations and in how they develop their loan products.
That's great, actually. So you touched on something in terms of loan repayments, and I was going to ask about this because it's important to make the distinction between loans and grants. And so you are working with loans. I'm curious about, you talked about earlier, financial literacy and the resources throughout the loan program that you or let's say your local lenders provide for the women to help them be able to be financially responsible at the end of the loan term and be able to repay the loans since they aren't grants.
Yeah, exactly. That's super important. So like a huge principle of microfinance is that we do get repayments back. And that's so that, well, first of all, it's financial access. Anybody has to repay their loan back, right? And so in order to expand financial access, you need to ensure that people are getting loans, not handouts. And so the institutions that we work with need to be financially sustainable so that they can grow and serve more people. It's really hard to raise money these days. And so if you are actually running a lending institution, you're getting that money back and you can keep relending the same money to support the community, then it makes you a lot more sustainable in terms of being able to support people, which is great. Financial literacy, well, you have to remember, like, we think about these women as never having had a loan, but that's actually not true. Normally they've had a loan from somebody in their community or a loan shark that charges like a 300% interest rate, which is insane. So we're coming in as like a formalized, responsible lender to make sure that they have access to a loan that is reasonably priced. So women often have, or their families have had some sort of experience with taking money and having to repay it. So they know about the concept of a loan. but they don't know about the concept of a loan in a formalized way, where it's like you have a specific repayment schedule that you have to stick to. And if there's a credit bureau, if you default on that loan, you might have a bad credit score, all that sort of stuff. So that's the stuff that generally has to be taught by our local institutions.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Almeera, tell us, you know, I was reading about your bio on the website, and one of your personal and professional passions is advocating for women of color from marginalized backgrounds. So where does this passion come from, and how do you do this through both your personal and professional work?
That's such a hard question. Like, I think whenever we're talking about passions, it's always so hard to kind of decide where does it come from. So I'm going to do my best. I'm sorry if I don't give it enough justice. But I think a lot of what I'm going to say is going to sound a little repetitive. But most spaces of power weren't designed for women, young women, and women who look like me. And as an end result, you feel like you don't belong, or you won't explore a specific career path because of the trauma that may come out of it. And as a young woman of color myself, who's dealt with unnecessary microaggressions that shouldn't be there in the first place, you want to be able to come to work, or when you want to challenge an opinion, you want to feel safe. So I think it's a culture shift. It's really hard to access these spaces. And one time I saw a tweet that said, young women don't want to join governance boards, which is why we don't put them on. And I was so floored, because I was like, I could name 7 or 10 or even 20 young women that would kill it. They just don't know about it, and they're not recruiting from different pools. So these days, it's all about who you know in your network, and oftentimes young women who are coming from marginalized backgrounds don't have the same opportunities that make your resume stand out compared to other communities. And I think that really works at a disadvantage, because as a result, they're passed on from really cool opportunities that they would really benefit from, and the organizations would benefit from their perspective. I think another thing is, a lot of the times when we are coming in from informal experiences, like, you know, I was president of my chapter of Amnesty International in university, or I was a part of this like student union, or I organized this, that's not seen as a professional experience. But one thing that I'm personally trying to do, especially at Girls20, is change the narrative around your extracurricular experience. It can be translated into professional experience, because you're doing a lot of those skills. It's just that you don't have that title, or you don't have an organization that's backing you up on it. So a lot of the times you already have the skills in place, but you don't have the label. And so in terms of how I do this through my personal and professional work, a lot of the times I'm the youngest person in the room. I'm actually one of the younger people on my team as well. And I know that I would be doing a disservice to young women everywhere if I just sat there silently. One of my favorite quotes is by Shirley Chisholm, and she says, you know, if you're not invited to take a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And I think that has always been my motto. It's like, okay, I finally got into this space. I really like it, but I'm not going to let my shyness, or because I'm the youngest person, or I feel like I have to lower my voice so I could be taken more seriously, or change the way I dress. I'm not going to do that, because I'm doing a disservice to other young women. And so when you show up prepared. I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
Perfect. So helpful. This is for both of you. So first, how have your role and organization evolved, and how do you predict it will evolve beyond 2021? And how can college students and young professionals support your mission or get involved?
I don't mind going first, since I'm already unmuted. So I will say equity work is always ongoing and a work in progress. And I hope to continue to use the platform of Girls20 to ensure that other young women are taking a seat where decisions are being made. And I think the goal is that one day I shouldn't have to do this job. But I don't think that will happen for a very long time. And so it's constantly listening to your community. It's constantly engaging with the young women and the participants of our programs and hearing from them what they need from us. Because as an organization, like, we do have good networks, we have a good relationship with different stakeholders. And if we could leverage that to support our community, why not? In terms of how can students and other young professionals support our mission or get involved, we are actively recruiting all the time for volunteers. So if you are interested in being a volunteer, I can't promise you if we have something right now, but if that is something of interest to you, I can pop my email into the chat. But I would say follow us on social media. Our Instagram is the best way to keep up to date on our engagement and what we're up to. As I mentioned before, we have 2 programs. So one is more global. So if you are from, any place outside of Canada, feel free to apply to be a delegate as part of our global summit. But if you are based in Canada, feel free to apply to our program to be a part of a board and get some governance training. But even then, even if you don't get into these programs, like, please do engage with us. Please do email us, because we do love sharing our resources and sharing our research. We have a lot of thought leadership on our website, and so if you would like to engage with that or even write for us, that's something that we're always willing to do. So I'd be happy to pop in my email into the chat, and I'd be happy to also talk about what a volunteer opportunity would look like, because I'm very open to it.
Great, thank you. Kendra, any thoughts there?
Yeah, Kiva has evolved a lot, actually. So our main product used to be, well, still is our crowdfunding website, as I mentioned, for microfinance loans, but we've started expanding our scope a little bit in terms of other ways that we can address financial exclusion. And one of those ways is there is a huge issue with lack of identity in a lot of places in the world. People don't have identity cards. When you think about signing up for a bank account, typically you have to take like a utility bill or something into the bank to prove your identity, prove your residence, all of that sort of stuff. And a lot of places, people who are underserved just don't have that. So we are trying to solve for that, in that we have a whole arm of our organization. Kiva is a tech company at the end of the day. We're based in San Francisco. I would say a third of our staff are engineers, because if you think about it, it's a crowdfunding platform. So we wanted to leverage that technology knowledge to see how we could solve for identity. So we've developed a system called Kiva Protocol, and I'm gonna say blockchain, but it's distributed ledger technology. Not my area of expertise. Our engineers could explain this a lot better. But we have developed this system to track digital identity. And we're working along with the UN and the government of Sierra Leone to implement it there. So that Sierra Leone already has on record people's fingerprints. And so we have created a system where people can go into financial institutions, microfinance institutions, or banks, and scan their finger or their thumbprint, and all of their ID information comes up. And then it allows them to open a bank account or take a loan based on that information. And we don't have this in place yet, but we want to expand it to include credit history. So the idea is so that if somebody takes their first small loan from a microfinance institution, that credit history is recorded, and then potentially it allows them to go into a bank next time, since they already have a track record. So that's something that we're trying to solve for as well. And I think we'll just keep on evolving in terms of how can we leverage our technological background to solve for issues of financial exclusion. So that is something that we are looking at to expand, as well as how can we support the best small businesses during COVID. Small businesses have been intensely affected by COVID, especially ones that are women run. It's been a nightmare. And so we launched a fund along with Google to invest in I can't remember how many countries, but mostly located in sub-Saharan Africa, a little bit in the Middle East as well, and then also Indonesia, an investment fund to support financial service providers to then support small businesses that have been affected by COVID. So that's something that we are focused on too. How can people get involved? Well, go to our website, kiva.org, and make a loan if you can. I know people have less resources than they used to, so no pressure to, you don't need to. But that is one way to get involved with us. Another way is to, yes, follow our social media. If you make a loan, share it with your friends, encourage friends to do the same. We spread by word of mouth. We also have internship opportunities available that will come up on our careers site. Check out our careers site as well. See if there's anything that might be a good fit for you. We also have what's called the Review and Translation Volunteer Program, where every single loan on our site is reviewed by a volunteer, or translated in some cases by a volunteer who can translate from French, Russian, Spanish, or Portuguese. So if you're proficient in those languages and you're looking for a volunteer translation opportunity, then we also have that available. Oh, sorry, just one more thing. Oftentimes, so when I was in university, I was part of a student association where we raised funds that we then put into a Kiva account, and we would lend on Kiva. So when you lend on Kiva, you do get repayments. We have a repayment rate of 96%. So if you make a loan on Kiva, you're going to receive repayments on that, and then you can re-lend the same money. So if you raise some funds, start a fund to lend on Kiva, you will get repayments into that fund. And yeah, so that's something that I did as a student as well.
That's such a great idea. Thank you for sharing. I'm just looking at the clock here and leave some time for questions, but I don't see any questions in the chat. Anyone have anything that they want to ask Kendra or Almeera? I'll give you a few minutes here. Okay, if not, we'll end a bit early. And if you didn't have a chance to submit through the chat, or the chat was not working for some reason, please feel free to email GrasshoppHer, and we will forward those on to Kendra and Almeera. So thank you so much, the two of you, for sharing your experiences and being here tonight. And thank you for everyone for joining our this webinar. I do want to call out two new programs here in case any of you are college students and want to get involved with GrasshoppHer directly. So the first is that we launched an ambassador program, and our ambassadors, who represent all genders, by the way, are really the backbone of our community. By promoting GrasshoppHer's values and sharing our news and organizing our event, you'll have the opportunity to be in certain leadership roles. You'll get marketing training and experience. Obviously, this is a great resume booster. You'll get to network with our team, the Grasshopper community, and other Grass ambassadors, and then obviously help move the needle for women in the workplace. And the second program I just want to call out is our Campus Club program. And we developed this as a response to COVID. It's your chance to have access to 9 months of both personal and professional development and job acquisition skills to help you secure and retain work during the pandemic. So check out our website for both programs and to learn a bit more. In the meantime, hang out with us on social media. And thanks so much for joining tonight. And thank you again to our amazing panelists. Thank you for sharing your stories and your work. All right, have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a nice night.
Bye.